I had an experience up in the northern woods that you probably wouldn't believe. I was going camping with a close friend of mine up by the Three Sisters Falls. It was getting dark when we arrived, so we set up our camp, made some supper, and got out our sleeping bags. I should have known something was wrong when there were no animals around to be seen or heard that night. The only noise was from the river, and it was beginning to get cold outside. As I fell asleep, I began having these nightmares about seeing an ancient creature in the woods that would come towards me, sometimes hiding its face and then showing it, but not doing anything except walking right past me, as if nothing happened. I woke up in my sleeping bag soaked through with sweat. My entire being, my heart, feeling like it could burst out of my chest at any moment. I believed what I had just seen in my dreams was a Wendigo, or something similar. I told my friend, and he didn't really believe me. He said that we had never heard of such things being sighted around here. It was probably just some strange nightmares. Now, after both of us falling back asleep, I began seeing this creature almost every time I closed my eyes, and eventually, I dreamt more about how it looked. Pale with this nasty hair all over its body, except for where the face is. Bright yellowish green eyes, sharp teeth on a twisted mouth. It smiled at me each time until finally the day came. I don't know how to describe it honestly, but this horrible feeling just lingered all morning long. My friend, he could feel it too. Described his own vivid nightmares he had all night, which we shared and were very similar to our own. We made sure the tents were tightly shut up and began packing our gear. As we were packing, the feeling of something lingering, something watching, never left. It was silent at first, but eventually grew more and more in intensity. The entire time we were packing up, the feeling that we weren't alone never stopped. And as soon as we had finished packing up, put the tents back in their bags, my friend had this really bad headache. He was telling me he couldn't take it anymore. We left and couldn't deal with it. I wish I knew what sort of strange paranormal events we had dealt with that very evening and night. I'm not sure if it was demonic, or if this really was the case of a Wendigo. This is exactly why I'm reaching out to you, in hopes you could provide us with some answers of some kind. See, my knowledge of cryptozoology is so limited, but from the little I know, this makes the most sense of what it could be. But, like I said before, I'll let you be the judge. I was out camping in the woods for a few days at the time with my friend and cousin. We were sitting by this lake, right around midnight, and we heard branches snapping. Footsteps headed towards us, and this weird guttural growl. It sounded like a cross between a wolf and a bear, or something. Anyway, my friend said he'd go take a look. I told him not to, but trying to be the hero, he did anyway. He was gone for like 20 minutes, and I hear branches and twigs snapping. He comes running back, freaked out, and just with this panicked expression all over his face. "We need to go now," was all he said as he grabbed our gear and we ran off. Of course, we came back. Later that night, we're all in the tent, and we hear branches snapping and footsteps again. In that moment, I'm wondering to myself, why did we come back? Why didn't we just leave like he had told us? So, I am done. I unzip the tent and yell out. There's no response. We just keep hearing these strange sounds for the next half hour. We heard this strange voice calling to all of our names. We thought it was maybe somebody playing a prank, but that was quickly dismissed after the voice became very audible and sounded all sorts of wrong. It was distorted and crackly, like it was coming from an old FM radio or something. I looked out of my tent, but I didn't see anybody. I tried my best to ignore it. We were all pretty spooked by what we were hearing. It wasn't until later, though, that next day, when I was taking a piss out in the woods, I noticed a lot of blood on the ground around me. As far as I knew, I hadn't seen any birds or animals around, so I wasn't sure what to make of it, other than maybe some poor animal got eaten. So I zipped up, went back to hanging out with my friend and cousin, and we began hearing the sounds again. A low growl, followed by this strange humming noise. Listen, I can't begin to tell you just how terrified we all were by sensing this creature, whatever it was. We all booked it out of our camping spot. Enough was enough. We both all ran towards where our truck had been parked, and without wasting a second, we all jumped in and flew out there very fast. We would come back and collect our stuff in a couple of days, but nothing, and I mean nothing, could prepare us for what sort of dark, sickly-looking creature we saw. It was ugly. I mean, it kind of looked like a golem troll-looking thing. I don't know. It freaked all of us out badly. I don't even like to talk about it, to be honest. It brings back bad memories. Even writing this out was tough. I've heard lots of stories about Wendigos, but they sound like a mix of Native American folklore and tall tales. I believe the Wendigo creature is part native culture from the north-central North America, namely in the Midwestern United States and eastern Canada. My only Wendigo story would be that my grandmother told me one of those scary campfire stories back when I was much younger, which involved a group of kids wandering off into the woods and being killed by this creature, aka Wendigo. It sounds like this thing is supposed to take on the form of other things in order to lure people away from the safety that they're in into the woods. But again, I've never seen it. Wendigo sightings aren't just restricted to places like Canada and the Great Lakes, though. I guess they've been reported as far away from there as Florida, even California, where certain Native American folklore likely wouldn't reach or influence people so much. At least that kind of folklore. I think that's odd and make these sightings seem much more credible. Anyway, as the story goes, a Wendigo is basically a man or a woman that has been, possessed by an evil spirit and turned into some sort of ogre demon thing. This creature's skin begins to change into something much different. The Wendigo is said to have a tall, lanky body, long arms, and it's often described as being very gaunt, bony knees and elbows. This creature usually has no hair, only sparse clumps of grayish hair on its head, and it looks disgusting, and looks like some sort of cross between an emaciated imp or something. And Wendigo sightings also seem to be increasing. In fact, I remember hearing news reports in the spring of 2005 about people in Florida seeing this strange creature, which was described as walking upright like a man, yet being 8 feet tall with extra long arms. One long arm longer than the other. It was also described as having a deathly pale white face, stringy black hair, and a large mouth that contained many fangs. Sometimes, the Wendigo is said to have glowing red eyes, or even blue ones. I know this isn't really a story and more just information, but I'd be curious to look more into the research side of things. What are your thoughts on Wendigos? I would love to know. Wendigos are these tall, skinny monsters that kind of look like a man, and I guess they're supposed to have antlers. They often have clawed hands and, as far as I know, walk on 2 legs. Some Wendigo sightings were in the woods or forests, while others were much deeper in the woods, so thick there's no sunlight. They cannot be easily seen. In fact, if you didn't know, in the Wendigo myth, there are said to be people of Native American descent who had committed cannibalism. They were not accepted by other tribe members. They would eat their companions, and eventually an entire village's population was gone, except for one person. That person was banished from his tribe and wandered through the forest forever as a Wendigo. The Wendigo is often seen in the Algonquin forest of northeastern America. It is an extremely violent creature, said to attack and eat people, hence the cannibalism. But it's not savage like a monster. The way it attacks is very cautious, premeditated, smart, unlike other monsters that are just mindless killing machines. They can travel anywhere, from running on all fours to walking bipedally. Wendigos may be changed by the moon and can change from wolf-like creatures into these man-eating beasts, sometimes at night. The Wendigo monster is often supposed to be attributed with creating winter storms and freezing temperatures as it passes through an area. It's even said that in one Native American tribe's story, there were a group of hunters that went hunting for the Wendigo. When they found it tried to escape by turning into a wolf, like shapeshifting. Although they killed the wolf, the Wendigo still came back as another animal, such as an eagle or even a human being. The Wendigo is said to prefer cold climates or places where there are blizzards and heavy snow. The lore goes that anybody who comes too close to the Wendigo will be killed by it and eaten. Native tribes also say that they sometimes return from their death in spirit form, or become another monster after death as a form of vengeance. It might not have just been one person who committed the cannibalism. It might actually be a group of them trying to gain their revenge by killing more people. When you hear the howling wind or heavy snow, it is said that the Wendigo can either be nearby or have just gone through the area. They usually like to stay in heavily wooded areas, close to wilderness, where they are much harder to find, and they can use snow to their advantage. You won't be able to see them or hear them most of the time, but you may know when one is near if you see a snowy area where there normally wouldn't be any. Bottom line, if you're near a Wendigo, it might try to disguise itself as another person with its dark magic. Beware for those who don't know.